For as long as I can remember, I've loved to draw. And while I'm definitely no Monet, over the years I've steadily honed my skills, and today I can draw things like this. Recently, however, I was digging through some old things on my bookshelf, and I found a folder from ancient times. I can remember it so clearly. Back in the day, little me was obsessed with any kind of fantasy world that had wondrous, made-up, fictional creatures. Things like dragons, Pokemon, Digimon, though I never played it, and even the various fantasy mobs from World of Warcraft, to name a few. I loved them all, and I wanted to make my own little made-up worlds just like them. And that's where the folder comes in. You see, I'd lug this giant thing around with me everywhere. And it always had at least two things inside of it. Spare sheets of copy paper, nothing fancy, just the regular kind you get for your home printer, and a pencil with an eraser. And those were the only two things I needed to create an entire world's worth of creature designs, all of which are also stored safely away inside the folder to this day. I remember treating this thing like it was the monster bestiary straight out of Okami. I would make drawings of the most random creatures, usually coupled with either a very poorly chosen name or some sort of quick description, and then I would shove them into this folder to never be seen again. There were creatures for all kinds of different biomes. Deserts, volcanoes, underwater, the sky. Some creatures had their own lineages, and I'm pretty sure that this was definitely 100% inspired by Pokemon evolutions. Some of them even had info or designs that referenced other creatures that they hunted and ate, or that they would use camouflage to disguise themselves from, or that they might try to mimic in order to ward off other predators. To be perfectly honest, though, a lot of them really suck. I look at these now and I feel my face twist into a pained grimace. But at the same time, I also can't help but feel, I don't know, nostalgic maybe? When I made these, it's very obvious in each and every one of them that I had no clue what I was doing. In fact, I had nothing but an idea and a pencil. But that was enough. I didn't care about whether or not it was plausible or how wonky the traits looked. I just wanted to draw and make my silly little animals, and that's exactly what I did. But, like I said, it's been a couple decades. I've gotten a lot better since then at drawing, and as I look at these wacky little guys, I can't help but feel that after all this time, they deserve a glow-up. And that's exactly what we're gonna give them. So, I dug through the folder for a bit, and I picked out a few guys that really stood out to me. They were these ones. Garoku. He looks like some kind of dragon, I think. He's very spiky, and I'm surprised he doesn't really have legs. Garano. This one looks to be some kind of little seal? Otter? Fish? Dog? Thing. I'm not really sure, but I like his shapes. Apparently, he can travel up to 50 miles per hour, and he can hold his breath for 24 hours? Wow, what a guy. Karanu. He's like a little fox. He kind of looks like a little onion. Or a garlic, maybe. I have a feeling this one is definitely inspired by Tails from Sonic, and by Pokemon. Oh, also apparently he's the baby of Draenorion? I went to go find what that was, and it's literally just Tails from Sonic. Okay? You can't tell me that it's not. I mean, look at it. And last but not least, Scorpo. This one's name cracks me up. I think it's supposed to be a little desert scorpion? I'm not entirely sure what's going on with his everything. But his name is funny, and I don't draw bugs enough, so he seemed like a fun challenge. He's in. These are the 4 guys I've chosen, so let's get to drawing. Okay, so to start off with, I want to mention that for these redraws, I tried to stay as close to the original designs as possible. And while I may have changed a few smaller things here or there, I tried to keep the rest of the design largely the same. I didn't really want to redesign them so much as I just wanted to redraw the same creature, but with better art, so that we could really get that one-to-one, side-by-side comparison. Starting off with Garoku. This guy was probably one of the easiest to redraw. There wasn't a ton I ended up changing from the original art, aside from maybe the most obvious thing being the shape of his wings and the length of his arms. The original had these kind of layered, tattery wings, and I just felt that making these ones look a bit neater and more sleek would fit the design a lot better. As for the arms, I also wanted to give him a bit more range of motion than his original little nubby T-Rex arms would have allowed. All the better to crush things with, I say. The rest of it, though, looks pretty much the same, aside from having newer, cleaner art. Out of all of them, I would have to say that this one and Scorpo were the 2 that I ended up liking the most, especially once I start adding color to this one. There's just something about the yellows and blues that makes the whole design feel very electric and energetic and, I don't know, cheerful? Pleasant? I like to think you'd see these guys gliding over seashores or rocketing about around hidden mountaintops. To me, if I could give them a personality, I would say they seem very righteous and like courageous defenders. They've got a lot of strength, but they dole it out with carefully tempered restraint. I'll finish up with adding the final touches here, a bit of light shading, a bit of shine. And here he is. Garoku. Now on to the next. We've got Garanu. If I'm being entirely honest with you, this one was very unassuming and actually gave me more of a challenge than I initially expected. A lot of the body shape was pretty easy, and most of it stayed largely similar to the original drawing, just as intended. But you may notice that I did add a few smaller things here and there to help with some of the form. A pair of long, pointed ears to break up the shape of the head, and a more pointed snout, along with a wider, more rotund body, which is what I think I initially intended, but probably just didn't have the skill at the time to execute exactly. Oh, and a small set of 4 cute seal-like flippers. This was all fine and good, easy enough, but where I had the most trouble was here, in the coloring stage. I could not, for the life of me, figure out what sort of markings to give this guy. The original is pretty simple, and there's not really a ton to go off of in terms of patterns, so I wanted to make something up just to give this design a bit more of an interesting appearance. You'll notice that I fumble around back and forth with the markings a bit here, trying to see what looks good and what works for my tastes, and while I do ultimately land on something that I'm satisfied with, it actually took a lot more stumbling around than you can see in just this quick time lapse. In the end, though, I think he turned out just as good as the rest. And now, all cleaned up and polished and shined, here he is, Garanu. Quite an improvement there, if I do say so myself. And I do. This one is one of the silliest of the bunch. Karanu. Goodness, these name schemes. Little me was just a regular old Shakespeare pumping these ones out, huh? Luckily, this little guy didn't give me too much trouble to work with. I think the biggest thing I got stuck on for a while was trying to decide whether or not to give him ears. Something about his little garlic head just seemed off, and I couldn't decide if I liked it or not. But ultimately, I think that adding ears would have made this redraw stray a bit too far from the original, and would have changed the shape of the head just a bit too much for my liking, so I decided against them. Everything else from there was pretty much smooth sailing. A little golden fox, which, while I intended for the colors to signify a tie-in to fire powers, in retrospect looks a lot more like Tails than I would have liked. I can't believe I didn't even realize that while coloring him in. How is it that I was trying to not make him look like Tails, and I still ended up going with the same color scheme? Goodness me. Anyway, here's this little guy all finished. Okay, get him out of my sights, because up next is my favorite of the bunch. Here he is, the man, the myth, the legendary beast, Scorpo. You know, I actually considered renaming all of these creatures for a moment while planning out how this video was going to work. But in the end, it really was Scorpo that made me decide against it. I mean, how could I ever come up with a better, more fitting, and more intimidating name than that? It's the kind of name that just strikes fear into the hearts of his enemies. Scorpo, the all-devouring. Scorpo, the terrible. Anyway, names aside, like I mentioned earlier, this guy was also one of my favorites, despite the fact that, much like Garanu, he actually wound up being a bit of a challenge to work with. I don't really draw bugs all that often, so nailing down his body shape and proportions and just making him feel generally insectoid in nature was surprisingly difficult. You'll see that I rework his body a couple of times before finally winding up with something I'm happy with, and even then, I actually wound up making not just one, but two versions of this creature. Because while I was messing around with shapes, I stumbled across something I liked too much to let go. And now, two Scorpo. The one on the left, I'm going to dub the cave-type Scorpo, a type that was domesticated by people and bred down for specific traits that enhanced his unique appearance. His body is very rounded and smooth, his face is very flat and grumpy looking, and when we get to the colors, you'll notice that his carapace is very shiny and colored richly like a tumbled stone or a polished gem. Personality-wise, this Scorpo is probably also the most like an attention-seeking lapdog, always wanting to lay somewhere and get pets and treats and snooze about like a little potato. The one on the right, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. He's very pointy, from his body spines to his elongated snout, and his colors, instead of being showy and fancy, are made more for camouflage, to make him look like the clay, sand, and cacti from the desert environments in which he lives. Personality-wise, this Scorpo is much more wary of interactions with strangers, and is probably very quick to lash out and sting if you aren't careful. Earning this one's trust takes a lot of time and patience, and you'll need to be willing to suffer a few scrapes. But if you're looking for a fiercely protective bug, then look no further than the desert-type Scorpo. Just a few more details and a bit of shading to both of these guys. And there they are. A champion, reborn from the foundations. All lined up, I think they look pretty good. I don't know what I'm gonna do with them now that they're like this, but I'll think of something, I'm sure. Well, that's all I got today. That was the video. If you wouldn't mind leaving me a like and potentially a bit of engagement down in the comments, how about you go on and tell me which one of these guys was your favorite? Oh, or, mandatory, which Scorpo do you prefer? Anyway, thank you so much for watching. As always, remember those fluids, because you know what they say. There's no sensation like hydration. And I'll see you around for the next one.